In this lesson, we're going to create a rotary operation. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to create a wrapped 2D operation and create a multi-axis rotary operation. In Fusion 360, we're going to be taking a look at two new files, rotarywrap.f3d and rotary.f3d. We're going to explore different types of fourth axis types of operations. The first, rotary wrap, is going to take a look at using 2D operations such as 2D adaptive clearing, 2D pocket, and 2D contour, and unwrapping and rewrapping those to a revolved part. There are some limitations to the wrap functionality. It must be a truly cylindrical part. It can't be tapered, and it has to be a true cylinder. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at using 2D adaptive clearing to clear out this wrapped pocket. We're going to start by selecting our tool, and in our multi-axis tool library, we want to use our 1/4" flat end mill with aluminum roughing. Inside of our geometry section, the first thing that we're going to do is use the wrap toolpath option. I'm going to select the outside of the cylinder so that it knows that it has a 2-inch diameter. This is important for it to unwrap and rewrap the toolpath. The next thing that we need to do is select the pocket. This is going to be the base or the root of that wrapped pocket. I'm going to zoom out so we can see exactly what happens when it starts to calculate. For our passes, I'm going to turn off stock to leave, but use all the other default settings and say OK. As soon as it starts to create this operation, you can see that it's creating a 2D adaptive based on a flat part and then rewrapping it around our cylinder. If we take a look at this in simulation and we manually drag it over, you can see that it's using that adaptive operation and it's rotating around the part. Now, again, this is not truly how it's going to work on a machine. The adaptive motion is going to be moving in X, Y, and Z. However, the part itself is going to be rotating about the A axis. So it's extremely important, again, that the coordinate system is set up in the appropriate manner so that the x-axis is the rotation axis and z is pointing up at the spindle of the machine. Let's go ahead and save our rotary wrap, and we want to move on to our rotary toolpath. Rotary is a true multi-axis toolpath. You'll notice that it has this small icon on it, meaning that it's an extension. An extension must be purchased, so in order to do this, you have to purchase an extension option. I'm going to take a look at the machining extension, and I'm going to be using the purchase 1-day option, which is 25 cloud credits. In order to do this, we get access to a whole host of different strategies. We have steep and shallow, we have 5-axis and collision avoidance, and we have many other things that are extremely helpful to multi-axis machining. But once again, this is a purchase option, meaning you'll need to purchase the extension. Oftentimes with these extensions, the first time you access them, there'll be some sort of trial period and you can play around with all the options. For our purposes, I am going to use that multi-axis rotary, but again, you don't have to purchase it. You can see how it works here and see if it's useful to you. We're going to select a tool, and in this case, I'm going to be using my 1/2" flat. So I'm going to select my 1/2" flat end mill, tool number 7, and aluminum roughing. In the geometry section, this is important because we need to set up the rotation or the rotary axis. In here, we want to make sure that the rotary axis isn't based on our WCS setting. Again, in this case, we need to make sure that it's revolving around the x-axis so we can set up our x-axis. So you can see here that it's now using the x or the revolved axis. And also note that we do have some angular limit options that we're not going to be exploring here, but we can dictate whether or not we want it to start and end in a certain orientation. Because this is a rotary or a revolve type operation, the stock settings look more like they do in a turning operation, and we're going to leave them as default, but these will dictate things like our clearance, our retract, and our outer radius. For our passes, there are a couple things that we need to dictate. Our rotary passes are based on a spiral, based on a linear or a line view, or a circular. If we do a spiral, it's going to be going around the part as if it's a thread. If we go back in and we take a look at our line option, it's going to go back and forth along the x-axis as it's removing that material. And you can see that this gives us a pretty close representation of the geometry. And that third option that we have in the passes section, using a circular, will allow it to go around and then step over in the x direction as it makes its passes. So this is not going to give us the cleanest option for this geometry. In our case, using the line option is going to give us the best representation of our geometry. You could also use a rounded tool like a ball end mill to get much closer to the final shape. But you can see even in this case, the flat end mill gives us a pretty good result. Let's take a look at this and simulate so we can get a better idea as to how the tool is moving. So you can see that the tool is moving in X and Z simultaneously, and then it's rotating the part about the A axis as it does this again. So in a situation like this specific tool path with how we're using it to cut is only moving in X and Z, and then it's rotating about the A axis to its next position. If we were to use the spiral option, it would be moving in X and Z while it's constantly rotating about the A axis. So we have to keep in mind again the orientation of our X, Y, and Z and how critical that is to our fourth axis positioning. Once again, this is an extension option. And if you want to learn more about the extensions, you can always go into your preferences, into preview features, and you can go to your workspace manufacturer and just look at what's available with the extension add-on. There are advanced arranged, we've got live machine data connection, restrict to 4-axis, split a toolpath, and change tool modifications. These are things like trim toolpath and delete. And all of these options come available to you when you purchase the machining extension. You can also come in here and take a look at each of these. And there's also a Fusion 360 extensions link that tells you more about each of them. For right now, let's make sure that we've saved rotary and rotary wrap. And if you haven't purchased the extension to play around with rotary, you can also explore some other options that you have and try to machine this geometry with some of the existing toolpaths. Once you've saved these, let's go ahead and move on to the next lesson.